With a devastating Game 4 loss to the Boston Bruins to put themselves down 3-1 in the first round, this Leafs core looks completely done. There are going to be some massive changes to this Leafs core this offseason, all circling around Mitch Marner. And as Chris Johnston confirms as well, barring an unlikely and unexpected comeback, this is the end of the Maple Leafs as we know them. Though with the complete lack of playoff success, this might actually be a good thing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But today we're going to be breaking down every single trade rumor surrounding this Maple Leafs squad coming up, the big massive changes that could happen this offseason, what trades and moves and signings we could end up seeing, and to see just how much this Leafs squad will end up changing next year. So make sure you watch till the end for all the trade rumors and the complete breakdown, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey and trade rumor content just like this as we break down every story this offseason. And of course, in the playoffs too, and you guys won't want to miss a thing. It's honestly sad for the Leafs just how far they've fallen, that there's very good odds right now for them to even win in 7, even though it is still a possibility. Almost nobody has faith in them. Honestly though, I think the Leafs are just going to find a way to rip the heart out of Leafs fans again, winning in Game 5 just to lose in Game 6, plus 325 odds for that. I'm going to put $10 down and $32 on BetUS and see how it goes. Plus, if you're a depressed Leafs fan and you predict the Bruins to go far just like the Panthers did after beating the Leafs last year, they got plus 1,000 odds to win the Stanley Cup. Not too bad there. If you guys want to sign up to BetUS, we got a referral link in the description down below. Every time you guys sign up, it helps the channel out tremendously when you guys do, so every bit is appreciated. And now let's get straight back into the video. Now, I know I just mentioned there's the chance the Leafs could come back in this series, but it is pretty minuscule, especially with how the Bruins are playing. They are smothering Toronto in so many ways that I just don't see them coming back, or at least winning this series. Maybe they make it a little more interesting, but the Leafs just aren't going to win this. And really, unfortunately for Toronto, there is going to be some massive changes, and already we've seen a bunch of insiders coming out and talking about the changes that will be coming with the Leafs. And with this series likely coming to an end, this Chris Johnston article had a ton of good info that I wanted to share with you guys. As Chris Johnston ominously writes, he says, barring an unlikely and unexpected comeback down 3-1 in the first round series of the Bruins, this was the end of the Leafs as we know them. There is no conceivable way to run this back. It hasn't worked, and it isn't working. As Chris Johnston says, with another season slipping away, it is difficult not to view these Leafs as a fundamentally selfish team, a term used by multiple people close to the group in the wake of Saturday's 3-1 loss. Rather than leaning on their past experiences and banding together to find a way through a tough time, they're seemingly splintered. And that is a crazy quote, not just his personal opinion, also people close to the team have called them selfish, have called them individual. And if that doesn't show you that changes are needed, I don't know what will. As Chris Johnston puts out the Sheldon Keefe quote, you can question a lot of things, you can't question the effort. Chris Johnston says, while some will no doubt take issue with that assertion, there really isn't any evidence to suggest the Leafs team doesn't have individuals with a desire to win. They've just given us no reason to believe they're collectively up to the task of actually doing it. Those are some ruthless words against the Leafs core, this Leafs franchise, and the team they have from somebody in Chris Johnston who's plugged in, has been around this Leafs team for a long time, knows these guys. For him to write that, for him to say that, for him to have those sources as well, he's backing it up big time. And let's be honest, if those sources are true, they are a selfish individual team, who's surprised? I don't think anybody is surprised by that assertion. It's just confirming what we probably already knew. They are a group of players that is yet to band together truly as a roster, truly as a complete unit. And you look at the other squad that they're facing in the Boston Bruins, a team that is cohesive, a team that can roll out any line and get production, can get a complimentary play out of them. And you see this Leafs roster and what they're able to do, and it's just a joke. It's not even a competition. The Bruins as a franchise, as a team, as a leadership unit are on a different stratosphere. That's after losing Bergeron and Krejci, yet they're still miles, leagues ahead of what the Leafs are right now. And what I think is a great point by Kevin Papetti saying, why haven't the Leafs had much playoff success? It's interesting because they've never contended for a playoff trophy. They should have been a 1 seed by now, but 2021 doesn't count. And saying the Leafs had the 10th best record out of 16 playoff teams. Only the Islanders and Capitals had less regulation wins. That's just not acceptable when you have Matthews in his prime. Sometimes they can't get it done in the playoffs, thing sweeps over some other issues. And it's a great point. This Leafs squad hasn't gone gotten it done in the playoffs, but when have they really ever gotten it done in the regular season either? You look at the past few years and they've obviously always been in the mix, always been a playoff team, but when have they been this great team that should always be the favorite? They've really never been up to that point. They never proved that they could be a Stanley Cup contender completely, even in the regular season. And with some of the talk around the Leafs only getting it done in the regular season, that's pretty rough. As Elliot Friedman mentions in the latest 32 Thoughts podcast, he says that them snapping at each other on the bench, Marner, Matthews, Nylander, we have not seen that from this group of players. This is the end for this group if they don't pull off the big comeback here. He goes on to say, Marner's contract, he's got one more year. That's going to force you into a decision. Tavares' contract, that's going to force you into a decision. You can only give so many votes of confidence. This is their last chance to prove they want to stay together, really referring to this series this year and how this was their last dance. Now that we know just how disappointing it is, now let's go on to this offseason for the Leafs. If they were to lose, especially in 5, what it could look like, the changes that can be made, and there are going to be a lot of. First things first, let's talk about the players and the moves that they won't end up making. Auston Matthews, for one, is never going to be traded. I don't think at any point the Leafs would consider trading Matthews, nor do I think they should. I mean, it feels like he has dealt with this sickness issue for a long time now, and the fact that he's still playing as well as he has, especially earlier on in this series, is pretty commendable. I don't think you trade Matthews, especially with how dominant he's been. That's a non-starter. Just like Matthews, Nylander was also dealing with similar health issues that kept him out for the start of this series. I don't think you trade him either. Even though he had a slower end to the season after his contract extension was signed, I still think he is a difference maker and one of the players you keep. Now, Matthew Nyes might not be on the Matthews type of untouchable, but I think he's also a core piece of this roster that you don't want to move. The type of power forward, especially on the younger side, that you want to keep for the cheaper contract, and he's had a great season up to this point. I thought he's had some learning curves in this series versus Boston, but still, I think in the future he's going to be an impact play. But you just look at the rest of the roster, and how many other guys would you keep 100%? I don't think that many. I mean, I would want to keep a player like a Nicholas Robertson. I love him a lot. So Timothy Liljegren, I think, is a player you want to keep. Same thing with Joseph Woll as well. But besides that, there could be some sweeping changes here. And you also got to consider the GM we're talking about here in Toronto, in Brad Treliving, who is not afraid to make massive sweeping changes. You have the two massive trades, acquiring Dougie Hamilton and then later sending him off to the Carolina Hurricanes for Elias Lindholm and a huge package. You, of course, had the mammoth Matthew Tkachuk to Florida trade, bringing on Huberdeau, bringing on Weegar, and we could talk about how good of a trade that is, but you can't deny how massive it was. And really, I see Brad Treliving doing the same thing in Toronto, absolutely gutting this team, because it's also not his team by a lot of means. Even though he acquired a lot of players that are on the roster right now, he made a lot of changes last offseason, he really didn't tinker too much with the core. He really didn't tinker too much with the top-end players, but I think that's all going to change this summer. First things first, they have beaten around the bush for far too long, but the Leafs need to trade Mitch Marner this offseason. It is a must. For me personally, I think it might be good for both sides involved. For Mitch Marner's case, I just think the pressure and the intensity of this market is just weighing him down, and I just don't feel like he's going to be able to perform at the level he could under the intensity, and it's just not working for him. If he goes to a less pressurized team like maybe the LA Kings or something, I could see him being a better playoff player and a better player because of it. I just don't think it's going to work out in Toronto, unfortunately. And for the Leafs, there needs to be massive sweeping change to this roster, and what better way than to trade Mitch Marner, the one player that has really just not worked consistently in the playoffs, especially versus big, tougher opponents like the Florida Panthers, the Boston Bruins. It just doesn't seem like it's ever going to change. I mean, the guy is going to be turning 27 this May. This isn't this young, sparkling kid anymore. The excuses are gone. They're over, and they're gotten rid of, and the Leafs should get rid of him while they can. There is the complications of Marner having a no-move clause, but again, I think when you talk to him, when you consider the options and talk to him as well about how I think it could be better for him too, I think he could learn to accept a trade and go somewhere else. We ended up seeing this tweet from Greg Wyshynski actually talking about a Mitch Marner's trade, saying, "A very smart hockey person put this in my head recently, and I think this is the perfect time to float it to Utah, Mitch Marner, and to Toronto, Clayton Keller." Now, this would be wild for so many different ways. I mean, this would be the biggest blockbuster one-for-one trade that we might have ever seen in this league, but it could be pretty fascinating. To me, though, I mean, with just how important Keller has been to the Coyotes and now will be to Utah, I'm not sure they make a trade like that, especially with how much Clayton Keller has proved to be a actual driver of play himself and an actual carrier of offense. Meanwhile, I think Marner also just kind of does better when he has this superstar next to him. Meanwhile, Keller is the superstar there with that franchise. It would be interesting, though. Keller in Toronto, I'm not sure how much different he plays in the playoffs compared to Marner, because we haven't seen Keller in any playoff experience, really. With Keller, he's a little bit unproven, but you can see back in 2020 when he made the playoffs with the Coyotes in the bubble, he got 44 points in the regular season, but got 7 points in 9 playoff games. So maybe Keller is able to step it up when it matters most, but that was in the bubble, and it's hard to really tell. Though I think this is a trade I'd be willing to make if I was Toronto, just to experiment with it. You have Keller with Matthews, the USA Hockey connection there. That would be pretty fascinating to see. Plus, he also just has a way better contract. He makes $7.1 million for the next 4 seasons after this, which is an incredible deal for Keller. Honestly, among top-end players, might be one of the best contracts in the league right now. So let me know in the comments down below, would you do a Keller for Marner trade if you were both sides? Do you think both sides would agree? Let me know. There's also the hilarious thoughts by Jay Fresh going around talking about Marner to LA or Vegas, and then talking about a Marner for Pietrangelo trade. Now, this idea is absolutely wild to me for a lot of reasons. I don't think it's completely off base, at least if we're talking about a Marner trade and what Toronto will be looking for. I just think for both teams, it's just a little bit off to where it wouldn't happen. In the case of Marner, I mean, I think Vegas would love to bring on another forward of the level of Marner, but I just don't really feel like he plays the style that Vegas wants to have in the playoffs, this physical, imposing, forechecking game. I just don't feel like Marner brings a whole lot to that system, but obviously the offense will be incredible. But you also have the Toronto side, where, I mean, I think they would love to have a player of the style of Pietrangelo in a Marner trade, but he's 34 years old, and even though he's still at a fantastic level, you really don't know how many more years you have of that. Plus, he still has a pretty lengthy contract at $8.8 million, and I don't think his contract is anything close to a steal by any means, and I just feel like it's a little bit too off base. Though, for Toronto, getting a Stanley Cup champion, getting the type of D they wanted, maybe they're interested in him, but I feel like it would have to have a lot more from Vegas's side to make it work. Unfortunately, I just don't see a lot of perfect fits for Toronto defensively in the market right now. You have, of course, players that have been talked about before, like Colton Parayko, but I don't think you would completely fix what they need. He's not much of a puck mover, and even though defensively he's brilliant, I don't think he's going to be much of a rush attacker. Kind of a beefed up, amazing Ilya Lyubushkin if we're talking about player styles. Maybe a Travis Sanheim could be a fit, but again, I don't think he's a player that fixes your defense. There would have to be other major moves to try and alleviate those issues, though I do think Sanheim, in the solid year he's had, could be somebody that Toronto's interested in. But again, what would John Tortorella want with Mitch Marner? Nothing. If the Leafs just wanted to maybe offload Marner's contract and get a lot of younger players back, maybe that's the case there, and they just go for a free agent perhaps. Brett Pesce is a really interesting one in this UFA class. You also got Sean Walker, who the Leafs were interested in at the deadline, that maybe they signed in the offseason. But unfortunately, even trade-wise, there's nobody up to Marner's level defensively that I think they're going to be able to acquire. They're going to have to downgrade in a certain way, and that's just the unfortunate truth here. But no matter what they do, there are a lot of holes on this Leafs team and a lot of issues they could fix. I mean, I think the forward group could be a lot better. I also just think the defense could be a lot better. I mean, the goaltending could be a lot better. Maybe you ride Joseph Woll next year, but I think you want to have at least a surefire backup option that could be better than Samsonov this year. But there's just so many things that I think the Leafs need to change and need to get better. I think for the Leafs, there are 4 things that I think are necessary for them to get done in this offseason to become a better team in the future. 1, you trade Mitch Marner. I just don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work out, and it would open up a lot of doors for the Leafs to get a lot of different players and add a lot of depth on the roster. 2, and it's related to the Marner trade, add better depth on the wings. You added Bertuzzi, Domi, and they have been solid in the playoffs, but I think especially if you aren't going to be able to re-sign those players, add some youth, add some guys that are unproven, add guys that like an Arthur Kaliev who could surprise, who could actually use the opportunity in major ways and fill out that middle 6, make it faster, make it better. I think it will make Toronto a better team in the end. I also think revamping, especially that right side of the defense. They don't have much coming up in the future. I think Connor Timmins is the only player signed for next year. There's a lot of opportunity there with the free agents they could get, and also who they could trade for on the Marner side. If they want to get a big time D, add it to the right side, add some stability there because I think they do need it. I also believe they need to add a goaltender. Maybe a David Rittich is the type of goaltender you go after, but somebody that has a proven track record of at least being good as a backup, who can provide some stability, be a stopgap before Wall is potentially the starter of the future, and give them somebody else to play with. I also do think, number 4, you got to fire Sheldon Keefe. I think it's time. I think he's lost the message. I think he's lost the entire plot. He isn't what I think Toronto needs right now. I think they needed somebody like a Craig Berube. That, to me, would be the perfect hire for Toronto if they're trying to bring in a winner, trying to bring in more of a consistent locker room presence. To me, Berube will be exactly the type of beast that Toronto needs in the playoffs to push them, to get them to that next extra level. That, to me, would be the perfect scenario. And obviously, it's a lot easier said than done, but Brad Treliving has made some big moves in the past, and he made some pretty big moves in the offseason as well, without really tinkering with the core. But once he does, I think the Leafs are in shape to make a lot of different additions, and some pretty good ones too. They can get creative. They can be better than what they are right now, and I think the sky is the limit. But I do think you need to change that core. I think you need to tinker with it, make it better. I don't think this Leafs team is completely in the dumpster. I don't think you throw everything away. There are good things to salvage here, but they need to start this offseason and need to go in a different direction, because what's right now with this Leafs team ain't working a bit. But I'd love to know your thoughts down below. What do you guys want to see the Leafs do this offseason? What do you think they need to do this offseason to be a better playoff team in the end? Would love to know your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you guys haven't already. And share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online to get the Leafs talk out to them. And click on this card for all of my hockey rumor talk right in one playlist. And I will see you in the next one. I hope you have a fantastic hockey playoff day, and I will see you in the next one, folks. Goodbye.